Well, hey guys, it is Mr. Gallion, and I promised I would answer questions that you've dropped me in a couple different places, and so I figured this is a good time to do it. I'm going to try to keep these videos to about 10 minutes. If it's longer than that, I'll break it up into two. As always, look down in the comments because I've tried to timestamp these, so if you don't want to listen to all my random thoughts about truly random questions, maybe just check those out, and maybe that'll help you, okay? I'm going to go through these sort of. I've looked at these, but not all of them, and I haven't really thought of answers. I just don't want to read them all out loud because some of them are, relatively personal. So the first one is one of those kind of personal ones, and it's basically somebody apologizing for not doing better because things have just been really bad lately. And my guess is that if you're watching this, there are probably like 4 of you who are like, "Oh, he's talking about mine," because this is one of the great things. You're really not alone. If your year is bad for a variety of reasons, whether it's health things in your family or extended family, or whether it's, job loss in your family, or whether it's just the pressure of, oh man, we've got all this pandemic stuff that's still going on, and we have the election stuff that's over, but there's still a lot of angst about it, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that weighs on you. Like that, guys, you have lived through more in the last year, more like big things that whether they demand your attention or whether they get your attention doesn't really matter, but your brain just kind of is on alert all the time, and yeah, that's going to have an impact on your school. Like, I want you to learn history, but history is like secondary too. Let's hang in there together. Let's grow, hopefully, and let's survive this thing in both literal and figurative ways. Okay, so you're going to be okay. I'm not freaking out if you're missing assignments. Okay, I'm not. Yeah, there are great implications, but I'm happy to work with you on this stuff, but I'm not just like, angry at you or whatever. You're going to be okay. All right, really. Reach out to me if you're having issues and if there's anything that I can do, even if it's, hey, I need an extension on this, talk to me. Okay, we'll make stuff happen. Okay. Yeah, here's another one that's almost exactly the same thing, honestly. 2 back to back. All right, somebody says, well, our world is crazy right now. I guess my one question is, why are Republicans painted in such a bad light? It definitely happens on both sides, but the media mostly shows their actions as evil. Of course, storming the Capitol was wrong, but there's evidence that it wasn't just Trump supporters. Also, why were some of the Black Lives Matter protests considered peaceful when they were... Okay, hang on. We're getting into 2 different things. I'll come back to that one. So the first thing about Republicans, you should know this. I have voted for a Republican for president every year that I could vote up until 2016 when Trump ran. I voted third party in 2016. This last time I didn't vote for Trump, and you can let your mind wander as to what I might have done, and that's okay. I don't really want to say either way because I'll upset somebody. So, there it is. I would say this. I think a lot of people have just sort of been, and this is me, again, personal, not the school account, have sort of been turned off to a lot of things Republicans have done, the things that they've sort of turned a blind eye to for a while. It's definitely also true, though, that not all the Republicans are bad, okay? Even if you have issues, like I have some issues with where the Republican Party is right now, there's some really great people in the Republican Party. I'm a really big fan of Mitt Romney, and even though I don't agree with all of his politics, he's a guy who says, this is what I think is right. And even though my party doesn't always agree with me, and even though my people back in the state don't always agree with me, I think this is the right thing to do. And I think, honestly, whether you agree with him all the time or not is less important than we need guys like him who are men of principle, who don't just do what the party tries to force them to do, and there we go. One of the reasons that we are in this pickle where people sort of paint all the Republicans the same and all the Democrats is that if you're a Republican or a Democrat and you want to do something different from what your party wants you to do, there's a real threat that your party has over you, and that's that they're not going to help you raise money to run for re-election. And you might think that's not a big deal, but it's a huge deal. Your party can also punish you by saying, well, when we're in power, if you don't do the things we want to do, we're not going to put you on, a powerful committee like the committee over You might end up on the farming committee instead of the one about finance, right? That deals with the budget for the United States. Instead, you're worried about, the price of butter and stuff. So both parties are kind of like the leaders of their party, which, sometimes are doing great stuff and sometimes are not, can really force the rest of the party to do things, even if they don't think it's quote unquote the right thing to do. The other thing is that, Trump was super popular with a large chunk of Republicans. And so, but he was also, I think even people who like him tend to say, yeah, he did some things or said some things in ways that were inflammatory and upset people that didn't really need to happen. Well, the thing is, especially about his opponents, the thing is, a lot of Republicans saw that and were like, you know what? The base, in other words, the people who are definitely going to vote for me or who are definitely going to vote Republican, those people that voted for Trump are also likely to vote for me if I say the same nasty things about their opponents. Well, guess what? The problem is, guys, whether you're Republican or Democrat, your side isn't right 100% of the time. They're just not. And so if you are always saying, I'm going to do what the party wants me to do, and I'm not going to talk about the other side ever as if they had any good ideas, I'm just always going to say the Democrats are idiots, or always going to say the Republicans are idiots, yeah, my political base is going to love it, and they're probably going to keep voting for me, but that's not intellectually honest, okay? What we really need in Washington, D.C. and in all of our state governments is people who look at every law and say, what do I believe about this? What do I believe about this? What do my people think about this? Not what does the leadership of my party think about this, right? And then if you don't like those people and the decisions they make, then when you have a chance to reelect them, you get them out of office. That seems like what it ought to be. But the threat of we're going to lose money becomes a real problem. So how does that answer the question? Well, it answers the question because the question is, why does the media paint the Republican Party kind of all one way? Well, because there are some things that the Republican Party leadership has done that is incredibly unpopular with a huge chunk of the country, and they've sort of forced the party members to do it. Don't want to get into this discussion, but stuff like QAnon, right? Should the Republican Party tell QAnon people, basically, you're nuts, and you need to stop doing that stuff, okay? You need to stop believing that, for example, Hillary Clinton murdered a baby and wore its skin on her face. Or, I mean, you think I'm making this up, but I'm really not, okay? And we actually have some people now in Congress, at least one that I know of, from Georgia, who is like a supporter of QAnon. And that's, okay, look, I don't want to get too political, and I don't want to start naming names and say, this person's awful. I try to avoid that. But some of that extremism hasn't been shunned by the party, and that is why I think you see what you see. I want to be really clear, though. The Democrats, I think, have some ideas that I find personally very offensive, too. And I think they need to let their people vote their conscience more. But there you go. That's a very long answer to sort of an easy answer. I think I can get one more and then I'll start another video so I can keep it short. It's why were some of the Black Lives Matter protests considered peaceful when there were businesses and buildings being burned down? So here's the deal. The reality is that most of at least the Black Lives Matter marches were relatively peaceful. In fact, did you know that there was one in Greer and I think one in Greenville over the summer? And they were peaceful. You don't have people burning stuff down. You didn't have people that were, looting and rioting and that kind of stuff. Most of them really were just protest marches to draw attention to what happened to George Floyd. Now, there are extremists who show up both on the right and on the left, right? So you've got the Capitol riots, the Capitol insurrections, which there's not, so this person also said there's evidence it wasn't just Trump supporters. I would say there are a bunch of really good people who supported Trump who were there, and there were also some people who were really extreme. There's the FBI, Homeland Security, a number of folks, even when Trump was still in power, said that there was no evidence that it was Antifa or Black Lives Matter or anybody else. I've seen some of the evidences to the contrary, and they don't hold a lot of water. Okay. I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible. I actually talked about that in a video last week. You can go back and look for it. But most of the Black Lives Matters, in fact, the majority of the Black Lives Matter marches that happened across the country were peaceful. That's the truth. there are also some where you've got extremists, and there are some extremists in Black Lives Matter. So let's be really clear. There's an organization called Black Lives Matter, and there's a movement, Black Lives Matter. And they kind of overlap, but they also don't always. Let's think of it like a Venn diagram, okay? So you can say Black Lives Matter without being a member of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has, people who are even more left, kind of Marxist leanings, that kind of a thing. But you can also say, I don't buy into the Marxist stuff, but I do think that we need to find a way to, protect African Americans better than we do. All right. Let's see, the media seems so uneven in terms of opinions and views. Do I think that'll ever change? I'll answer that. I know this is all one person's question, so let me answer it and then I'll go to another video. So there's always going to be bias in the media. It's always going to happen because all people are biased. Anybody who says they are balanced isn't. We can want to be, we can strive for it, but we're not. So you really should probably look at news from more than one source, okay? And again, anybody who's selling you stuff like, come to our website, and I think I used this example last week. I have a friend who sends me stuff sometimes, and down at the bottom it says, donate to our site so we can help continuing to expose the Biden crime family. Well, guys, that's insane because they've told you right there that they're not going to try to be unbiased. They're going to try to use their resources to, quote, expose the Biden crime family. What if they find out that they're not actually a crime family? I don't think they are. I think that's pretty extreme right wing. What if they're not? Well, they have obligated themselves to prove that they are anyway, right? So, look, it's a real problem though, because if you can't be unbiased, what do? Well, there are, and again, I showed this to you in the last one. You can Google media political leanings, and you'll see a chart that tells you these people lean toward the left, these people lean toward the right, and people hate that chart. People are like, oh, they put these guys in the middle, but they're way left or they're way right. And guess what? Both sides say that. So I think they're pretty close to right, even if they're not perfect. So, the media is always going to be biased one way or another. It's just a fact of life, which is why you've got to look at more than one news source. But don't go to a news source that says we are always liberal news or we are always conservative news, because then you're definitely going to get skewed news, okay? So, there's the thought. All right, 12 minutes and 40 seconds, not bad. There'll be another video. Check it out. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys.